The Desert Schoolhouse, From Hope to Despair. Arizona, 1887. A land of wind, red dust, and death lurking at every turn. Into this merciless country walked Clara Donovan, an orphaned schoolteacher from New York, dragging her weary steps toward the unknown. The letter of employment she carried, what she thought was her ticket to a new life, proved nothing but a cruel snare that led her to a ghost town. Yet from that very despair, fate cracked open a door. Ethan Caldwell, one of the wealthiest and most respected ranchers in the territory, not only pulled Clara back from the edge of death, but also placed in her hands a mission greater than survival: to raise the first schoolhouse from the wild dust of Arizona. This is not just a story of rescue. It is the journey of a woman who turned suffering into light, fear into hope, for an entire community. August 1887. Arizona. The sun hung like a furnace in the sky, scorching the endless land below. Heat shimmered off the burning sands, turning every step into torture. Clara Donovan, a young teacher from New York, stumbled for the third time that morning. Her canvas shoes were torn to rags, her feet blistered raw, her lips cracked and bleeding. The small satchel at her side felt pitifully light, holding nothing but a few books, the last fragile threads of her dream. The desert wind lashed her face with dust and heat. Clara pushed herself up on trembling arms, vision blurred with sweat and exhaustion. She had walked nearly 100 miles since leaving Silver Creek, the town that had promised her work, but delivered only ruin. Now each step was nothing but defiance against death. Her throat scorched dry, Clara tried to summon the sound of New York church bells, the bustle of morning streets. But those memories only deepened the cruelty of the desert's silence. Cacti loomed like gaunt phantoms, and the sky above felt like a sealed vault with no escape. Her heart pounded with both weakness and fear. If I fall again, will I rise at all? Clutching the satchel to her chest, she whispered hoarsely, as if to keep her mind alive, I can't leave these behind. If I die, let the books die with me. Then it came, a faint echo on the horizon. At first she thought it was madness playing tricks on her. But no, the sound grew clearer, the pounding rhythm of hooves, steady and strong, like the drumbeat of fate. Clara lifted her head with fading strength. On the horizon, dust curled into the sky like smoke from a fire. Out of it emerged a lone rider, a tall figure swaying with the horse's stride, wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face. Her heart seized. In this land, a rider could mean salvation or doom, outlaw, hired gun, or a stranger with mercy in his heart. No one could say. She tried to cry out, but her throat gave only a rasp. Her legs buckled, collapsing her into the dust once more. The desert swallowed her fragile form. Through the haze of fading consciousness, the last thing she saw was the rider, urging his horse forward, hooves striking sparks of red dust into the air. Rescue or ruin? The desert would decide. 3 weeks earlier, a stagecoach rattled to a stop in Silver Creek. Clara Donovan stepped down with her teaching certificate clutched tight, her heart alive with hope. A letter from the town council had promised steady pay, free lodging, and children in need of a teacher. For an orphan girl from New York, her parents buried by plague, it seemed heaven's own gift. But the moment her boots touched the dirt street, her hope soured. Silver Creek was not the town of promise she had imagined. The saloons stood boarded shut, warehouses sagged and broken, homes sat hollow and cold. The few faces she saw, old men, weary women, gaunt children, carried nothing but suspicion and defeat. The mayor, old Henderson, who also ran the general store, met her with an apologetic gaze. Tugging the brim of his hat, voice gravel thick, he muttered, "Sorry, Miss Donovan. That letter was sent back in spring, when the silver mine was still running. But now..." His words trailed off, his hands trembling. The truth struck her like a hammer. She had sold everything she owned, spent her last coins on the stage fare. She had nowhere else to go. Henderson shook his head slowly. There's no school anymore, and no funds for a teacher. Most everyone's packed up and left. For 3 nights, Clara slept in the abandoned schoolhouse, roof leaking silver light of the moon. She survived on scraps given out of pity, a crust of bread, a thin cup of coffee. She tried teaching the few children left, but even they were fading, their parents preparing to leave. On the 4th morning, Henderson brought grim news. The stage won't be back for 2 months. And fare to Phoenix will be $20 for Clara. $20 might as well have been 20,000. In her pocket lay only $1.25. That night, sitting by the broken window as the desert wind howled, Clara made her choice. She would walk to Tombstone, the only thriving town left, nearly 100 miles away. A road of fire, but her last chance. Before she left, old Mrs. Hutchkins, the last woman still in town, pressed a small flask of water, 3 hard biscuits, and a handful of beans into her hands. "Don't go, child. This land is cruel." But Clara only clutched her satchel tighter. Inside, her teaching certificate and her mother's silver locket. At dawn, with trembling steps, she left Silver Creek. Behind her, the empty houses groaned in the wind, sighing like the ghosts of a dead town. What Clara didn't yet know, what the audience now sees, is that the letter she had carried across half the country was already worthless months before. Someone had deliberately sent it, preying on the hope of young teachers to wring profit from false fares and false promises. And out on that desert road, Clara had walked straight into a darker secret waiting to be unearthed. The noonday sun beat down mercilessly on the desert. Clara Donovan staggered a few more steps before collapsing onto the scorched earth. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her throat aflame, her eyes fixed on the endless blue sky spinning above. Death hovered close like a shadow ready to swallow her the moment she shut her eyes. Through the haze of near unconsciousness, a sound broke the silence, the steady thunder of hooves rolling across the desert. At first Clara thought it was another mirage, like the phantom oases she had seen, or the tolling of church bells that never existed. But the sound grew sharper, joined by a cloud of dust rising in the heat. A lone rider appeared, tall and broad, his wide-brimmed hat shadowing half a sun-browned face. Deep brown eyes, sharp yet steady, scanned the horizon. This was Ethan Caldwell, master of the Circle C Ranch. At just 29, he held thousands of acres and more cattle than a man could count. That day, while riding out to check his herd, he stumbled across a small, crumpled figure lying helpless beneath the brutal sun. Ethan reined hard, swung down and knelt beside her. Lifting her head gently, he saw scorched skin, cracked lips, breath faint as a whisper. "Can you hear me?" His voice was rough, yet low and steady. Clara's eyes fluttered open. Through the blur of dust and exhaustion, she caught the sight of his weathered face, tired from the trail but honest, warm. In the midst of her terror, that presence anchored her to the world. "Water," she croaked, voice raw. Without hesitation, Ethan pulled the canteen from his belt and pressed it to her lips. "Easy now." Not too fast, his calloused hand steadied her head as the cool water touched her mouth. Clara wanted to gulp it down, but his grip held firm, controlling the flow. "Slow," he warned, "or you'll choke yourself senseless." The water slid down her throat, spreading life through her body. Clara trembled as if in bliss, the walls of despair cracking just enough to let hope slip in. Tears glistened at the corners of her eyes. She nodded faintly. She had just escaped death by a thread. Ethan studied her face. Drawn and weary, dark hair tangled, pale blue eyes carrying both resilience and fatigue. She was no creature of this land. That much was clear. "What are you doing out here, alone in the desert?" he asked. But Clara could only shake her head, too weak to explain. Without another word, Ethan lifted her with surprising ease and set her on his horse. "His name's Thunder," he said, "gentle as they come. Lean against the saddle. I won't let you fall." He swung into the saddle behind her, one arm steady around her trembling frame. For the first time in weeks, Clara felt safe. In the vast cruelty of the desert, a stranger had become her lifeline. And deep inside her chest, the faint spark of hope flickered to life. The long ride finally carried them into Circle C Ranch as the sun sank in a blaze of crimson. The sky glowed, birds cried on their way home, and before Clara stretched a vision she never thought could exist here. A vast spread of land fenced in neat lines, stables and cattle pens standing solid, and a 2-story adobe house rising like a fortress against the desert. Strength and warmth, all in one place. As Thunder halted at the porch, a stout, middle-aged woman hurried out. Rosa Alvarez, the ranch housekeeper, silver streaks in her dark hair, her eyes sharp with concern. "My God! Who is this, Senor Caldwell?" she cried. Ethan slid from the saddle, holding Clara steady as he lowered her trembling body. "A teacher from back east. Found her collapsed out on the flats. Rosa, help me get her inside." At once, Rosa wrapped an arm around Clara, guiding her gently. "Come, girl. You're safe now." Her warm voice and steady hands stirred memories of Clara's mother, long gone but never forgotten. Inside, the kitchen carried the rich scent of soup and fresh bread. An old, wiry man with a beard gone silver stirred a pot over the fire. This was Cookie Harris, the ranch's grizzled cook. He looked up, grinned with toothless humor. "Another lost soul dragged in by the desert, eh? Sit her down, boy. Let her get some food in her." Clara's hands shook as she accepted the bowl Rosa offered. The warmth of the broth slid down her throat, salty enough to draw tears. In the glow of lamplight, she found herself speaking of the plague that had stolen her parents the winter before, of debts that left her with nothing, of the last hope she clung to as a teacher bound for Silver Creek. "I thought a small town might be a new beginning. But everything fell apart before my eyes." Across the table, Ethan's gaze remained steady. He saw not just her frailty, but the stubborn courage it took to cross the desert with nothing but her books and a dream. A respect stirred in him, rare and not easily earned. When Clara's voice faded, Ethan leaned back, speaking low. "Silver Creek. That's not the first time I've heard trouble there. Last year, another teacher came, then vanished. Some say she left. Others swear they saw her near the southern canyon. After that, nothing." The kitchen fell silent. Wind whispered through the cracks in the door. Clara shivered. His words cut like a knife through the shadows that already haunted her. The letter that led her west wasn't just false. It might have carried her straight into danger. In Ethan's eyes, she read both warning and promise. From this night on, she would not face the ghosts of the frontier alone. The next morning, Clara awoke in the small guest room of Circle C Ranch. Sunlight streamed through the wooden shutters, painting the thick adobe walls in a soft, golden glow. For the first time in weeks, she lay on a real bed, clean linens, free of dust and sand. Yet despite the comfort, unease still pressed heavy on her chest. Stepping out onto the porch, she found Ethan tightening the cinch on his saddle. He looked up, gave a curt nod, his face stern but his eyes calm. Clara summoned her courage. "Mr. Caldwell, I can't stay here forever. Once I've regained my strength, I plan to head to Tombstone. Surely there's a school there that needs a teacher." Ethan paused, silent for a long moment, before speaking low and steady. You don't need to risk Tombstone. That place is full of gold diggers and gunslingers. I've got another idea, Clara blinked in surprise. Waiting. Ethan stepped closer, his voice weighted with conviction. I'd like you to teach here. Not just for me and the men who work this ranch, but for the children scattered across these parts. I've spoken with some of the neighboring ranchers. They want a community school. They're willing to pitch in. But we need a real teacher. The words struck Clara like a spark to a cold hearth. Ever since her parents died, teaching had been her only anchor. Silver Creek had crushed that dream to pieces. Now Ethan was handing it back to her. More than survival, a chance to live her true calling. But I'm a stranger here, she whispered. Would the people accept me? For the first time, Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile, softening the harsh lines of his face. Clara, out here, respect isn't about where you're from. It's about what you bring. Words on a page aren't just for books. They help a cowboy sign a contract, give children a future beyond breaking horses. You might just be the hope this land has been waiting for. Tears welled in her eyes. She thought of the ragged children in Silver Creek, their hungry stares for a lesson that would never come. Perhaps here, just maybe, she could give to others what had been stolen from them. Her fingers tightened around the worn teaching certificate tucked in her pocket. She drew a deep breath and nodded. If you truly believe in me, then I'll try. In that instant, light returned to her eyes. A new future flickered to life, not only for Clara Donovan, but for the frontier itself. That afternoon, beneath the shade of a great cottonwood by a dry creek bed, Clara held her first class. Old planks served as desks. Children from nearby ranches gathered, their faces bright with wonder, eager as if stepping into another world. A few burly cowhands squatted nearby, awkward and amused, chalk in hand for the very first time. Clara stood before them, her patched dress neatly mended by Rosa, her dark hair tied back against the wind. She smiled, her voice ringing clear. We'll start with the simplest of things. This is the letter A. Her hand traced a curved line and a bold stroke across the slate. The children shouted with delight, copying with dusty fingers. The cowboys, more used to ropes and branding irons, scratched crooked letters, laughing at their own clumsiness. One, a fellow named Tommy, muttered with a sheepish grin, "Writings, harder than roping a bull." Laughter rippled, light and genuine. The air grew lively. Clara guided each child through their first words, showed the cowboys how to spell cow and horse. Her eyes shone, her heart raced. For the first time in her long, weary journey, she felt she belonged. But joy was fragile. From a distance came the stagger of boots, the stench of whiskey. A rough cowboy lurched into the circle, sneering at Clara. What good's all this scribbling? Out here, life or death comes down to a gun and a horse, not pretty letters. The sky dimmed, the evening wind carrying dust and the scent of dry grass. Ethan stepped in, firm and unyielding, scattering the tension but not the threat. The children shrank back, clutching each other's hands, wide-eyed. Clara held herself steady, though she knew deep down this was far from over. That night, oil lamps flickered in Circle C's dining room. Clara sat at a small wooden table, staring out at the shadows beyond. The drunk's glare haunted her, along with the muttered doubts of townsfolk. Women shouldn't teach. Kids need guns and saddles, not books. It felt like she was walking straight into the wind of a storm. Ethan entered, boots dusted, the smell of gunpowder clinging to him. He set his Winchester down on the table, voice low but resolute. You did right. But from now on, never face them alone. Clara met his gaze, firelight glinting in her eyes. Stubborn, grateful. I didn't come here to stir up trouble, Ethan. I just want these children to have a chance. To live with more than fear. He gave a single nod. He didn't need to say more. His eyes carried the weight of shared conviction. The next morning, Clara returned to her class. But it wasn't only the children waiting. A group of hard-faced men in dark coats leaned against the fence, eyes sharp as knives. She froze for a heartbeat. One of them spoke coldly. "Teacher, we hear you're planting ideas in young heads. Freedom, knowledge. Be careful. Those things can tear a town apart." The air went dead still. The children trembled, some half ready to flee. Clara steadied herself, turned to the board, and wrote a single word. Freedom. She faced them, her voice strong. This is today's first lesson. Freedom isn't given. It's something you must hold in your own heart. The men sneered and left, but Clara knew it for what it was. A warning. That night, fire crackled high at Circle C. Ethan and his trusted cowboys gathered, word spreading fast. Silas Turner, the ruthless land baron to the east, was angered by Clara's school. Knowledge, he feared, would spark rebellion. "If we let him be," a young rider spat, "he'll burn the place down tomorrow." Ethan turned to Clara, his eyes unflinching. "Are you willing to pay the price to keep this school alive?" Clara looked toward the wooden cabin, where the children still practiced their words by lamplight. She drew in a sharp breath. "I'm willing." The reckoning came on a dust-choked afternoon. As Clara taught beneath the cottonwood, hoofbeats roared closer. The door flew open. Silas's men burst in, torches and oil in hand. The children screamed. Gunfire cracked outside. Ethan and his riders were waiting. His Winchester flared, a bullet burying itself in the dirt at the intruder's feet. His voice thundered, "Drop those torches, or drop where you stand." The standoff burned with tension. Silas's men faltered, their courage wavering. One by one they backed away, leaving only the stench of smoke and fear in the air. When the doors closed again, Clara turned back to her students. Their eyes still trembled with terror, but behind it glimmered something new. "Resolve," she smiled gently. "You see? Freedom has a price, and it's ours to protect." From that day, the school beneath the cottonwood became more than a classroom. It was a fortress of faith, a beacon where courage, sacrifice, and knowledge burned together. And in every heart, a fire had been lit that no storm could snuff out. The stifling heat of early September pressed down heavy as Clara sat on the porch of Circle C Ranch, scratching lesson plans across a rough wooden table. Suddenly, the thunder of hooves pounded at the gate. A boy, pale-faced and frantic, leapt from his horse, his voice breaking. "Miss Donovan! Mr. Caldwell! It's Emma Patterson, my sister. She's trapped under the haystack. She's not moving." The pen dropped from Clara's hand. Her blood went cold. Emma, 10 years old, bright brown eyes, the clearest voice in her class, had just yesterday sounded out the letter B with pride. Now she hovered between life and death. Ethan was already strapping down his saddle, his face hard as iron. "Clara, come on!" Without thought, she swung up behind him. Moments later, they were galloping across the red dust flats, wind slashing their faces, every hoofbeat a desperate prayer. The Patterson ranch yard was chaos, dust and smoke rising, voices shouting, a woman's sobs cutting through it all. Men strained to lift heavy bales, their arms trembling. On the ground, Emma lay pale and still, one arm pinned beneath the weight of hay. Her mother knelt beside her, wailing, "Save my baby! Please, somebody save her." Clara hit the ground running, heart hammering, but something stronger than fear rose inside her, calm, sharp, commanding. "Don't move her!" "Let me!" she barked, and the men froze. She dropped to her knees, fingers pressed to the child's throat. A pulse, faint, but there. Clara bent low, her ear by Emma's lips. A shallow breath, weak but alive. "Ethan," she said firmly, "lift it slow. No jolts, or she won't survive it." Ethan nodded, rallying two men to ease the hay away, inch by inch. As the arm came free, Clara's eyes swept over it, bruised deep but no break. Relief flooded her chest. She tore the shawl from her shoulders, rolled it into a cushion beneath Emma's head, and cupped the girl's small hand in both of hers. "Emma, listen to me. Don't sleep. Keep your eyes open. You can do this." Her voice was steady, urgent, soft as steel. The child's lashes fluttered, her eyes flickering open for a heartbeat. Clara let out a trembling sigh, squeezing her hand tight. "That's it, sweetheart. Stay with me." The doctor's coming minutes dragged like hours. Sweat beaded Clara's brow, but her gaze never left the girl's face. The Pattersons hovered close, trembling, helpless. Ethan laid a firm hand on the father's shoulder, steady as stone. Then, hoofbeats again. The town doctor burst into the yard, bag in hand. He knelt, examined quickly, then lifted his eyes to Clara with something between surprise and respect. But Clara cared for nothing in that moment, except the tiny fingers still wrapped around hers. "Please, Lord, don't take her. Not this one." The yard fell silent as the doctor worked. Each second felt like a century. Clara's lips moved in silent prayer. Ethan stood behind her, his sharp gaze now shadowed with worry. At last, the doctor exhaled, his voice breaking the silence. "She'll live." No bones broken, just shock and loss of breath. What saved her from slipping away was Miss Donovan's care. The collective breath of relief was like wind through the yard. Emma's mother wept, clutching her daughter. Her father, hard as rock most days, gripped Ethan's shoulder, his jaw too tight for words. Neighbors gathered at the fence, their eyes fixed on Clara, not as a stranger from the east, but as the woman who had saved one of their own. Exhaustion tugged at her limbs, but warmth filled her chest. For weeks, she had wondered if she truly belonged here, or if she was only a wanderer. Now, the answer was clear. She was part of them. Ethan stepped close, his rough hand resting on her shoulder. His nod carried more than thanks. It carried respect. He had seen strong men falter under pressure, yet this slender woman had held firm where it mattered most. In that moment, he knew this harsh land had gained a new pillar of strength. As the others drifted away, the doctor lingered. He leaned close, his tone low and serious. "Miss Donovan, without your calm, the girl wouldn't have made it. The way you kept her alert, the way you handled every step, that isn't something everyone can do." Clara's eyes widened. Before she could speak, he added, "You have a gift. Consider studying medicine alongside your teaching. Out here, a healer's worth more than silver or gold. You could save many lives." His words struck deep. Until now, she had thought herself only a teacher, chalk and slate her only tools, but in that fragile moment with Emma's hand in hers, Clara had felt it. She could be more. That night, back at Circle C, she stood beneath a sky ablaze with stars, the desert air cool against her face. For the first time since she set foot in the West, she no longer felt alone. In her heart whispered a truth as steady as the land itself. This was home, and she would stay, come what storms may. The Arizona sun sank low, painting the endless valley in shades of fire and gold. Clouds drifted like ribbons aflame, their glow spilling down across the dry land where wild grass bent under the evening breeze. Ethan led Clara along a narrow trail, their horses walking easy, until they reached a hidden valley he had long kept for himself. "This is where I come when I need quiet," Ethan said, his deep voice carrying with the steady rhythm of hoofbeats. Clara lifted her gaze. The sunset burned in her clear blue eyes, and her heart quickened. Ever since Emma Patterson had been pulled back from death's edge, something unspoken had bound her and Ethan closer, thread by thread. They dismounted, and Ethan guided her up a small rise overlooking the valley. Below them, cattle grazed like moving specks of brown, while far off, purple mountains rose like walls at the edge of the world. Clara breathed deep, as though she were standing before a vast canvas painted by the hand of God himself. For a long moment, Ethan was silent. Then he turned. In his eyes, Clara saw more than the respect he had always shown. There was something deeper now. He stepped closer, his rough hand closing carefully around hers. "Clara," he said, voice roughened with emotion. "From the moment I found you in that desert, half dead and broken, I knew my life would never be the same. You're not just a teacher. You've brought hope to this land, and to me, a reason to believe in something better." The desert itself seemed to hold its breath. Ethan lowered his head, eyes locked on hers, steady and sure. "I love you, Clara Donovan, and if you'll let me, I want you as my wife. Together, we'll build not just a home, but a future, right here in this harsh country." Clara's heart tightened. Memories surged, lonely nights, desperate steps across burning sand, tears shed for her lost parents. And now, before her stood a man offering safety, love, and a promise of tomorrow. Her eyes filled. She nodded through the blur. "Yes, I will, Ethan." He pulled her into his arms, and their kiss burned against the crimson sky, tender and fierce, born of sorrow and hope, sealing the dawn of happiness. The desert no longer felt cruel. It stood as witness to a turning point, from despair into love, from a wandering girl into a woman who had found her home. That autumn, on the barren soil of Arizona, something sacred took root. The Cedar Springs Schoolhouse. At first light, ranch families came, hauling planks and stone, bringing calloused hands and a shared dream for their children. Ethan worked side by side with Miguel, his foreman, raising the frame, while Clara and Rosa kept the women busy feeding the crowd. The valley rang with the sound of hammers, saws, and children's laughter as walls rose steady and strong. To the little ones, it was more than a building. It was a doorway to another world. Clara watched with tears in her eyes. From a girl collapsed in the desert, she had become the soul of something that would shape generations. On dedication day, the sky was bright, cottonwoods gilded in autumn gold. Families gathered around the sturdy wooden schoolhouse. Inside, new pine desks gave off the fresh scent of resin, and a blackboard hung waiting for its first chalk marks. Ethan stood tall, his voice carrying clear. "Today we haven't just raised 4 walls. We've raised a future." Applause thundered, honest and heartfelt. Clara pressed her hands to her chest, tears shimmering. When the children filed inside, their eager faces were the finest reward she could ever hope for. In that moment of joy, Rosa slipped her a weathered envelope, postmarked Boston. Clara frowned, tearing it open. Inside, a distant relative she barely knew confessed. He had sent her the teaching letter for Silver Creek, though he knew the town was dying. The reason stunned her. He had heard of Ethan Caldwell, of Arizona, of a land crying out for knowledge. He believed Clara's fate was not in the crowded streets of New York, but in the frontier, where she would find not only purpose, but home. Clara's hands trembled as she lowered the letter. What she had thought a cruel trick had been fate's own design. She lifted her eyes across the crowd and found Ethan watching her, his gaze filled with quiet faith. Her lips curved into a smile, radiant with gratitude. The day Cedar Springs was born was not just the birth of a school. It was the day Clara Donovan understood that every desperate step, every tear, and even the letter that had once felt like betrayal, had led her here, to the place she truly belonged. Morning light stretched across the Arizona plains, gilding the fields where cattle dotted the horizon like tiny brown specks on endless earth. From afar came the lowing of steers, mingling with the wind through the cottonwoods, weaving a hymn of peace across the frontier. On the wide porch of Circle C Ranch, Clara Donovan, now Clara Caldwell, stood watching as Ethan showed their 3-year-old son, Daniel, how to toss a little rope around a fence post. The boy had his father's bright brown eyes, but his mother's steadiness and restless curiosity. Clara smiled softly, her heart swelling with quiet joy. Years ago, she had fallen in the desert, broken and alone. Now she had a home, a steadfast husband, and a child who bore the proof of a love that nothing could shake. Circle C Ranch had flourished. The herds had doubled. The pastures were managed with new methods born from the very students Clara once taught beneath the cottonwood tree. Tommy, the young cowboy who'd first scratched letters into dust, now tallied ledgers and managed contracts with ease. Billy Patterson, once a lazy schoolboy, now calculated feed and hay for the cattle with a sharpness that stunned the old hands. Cedar Springs School had grown too. From a handful of pupils, now more than 30 children came from ranches scattered across the valley. Clara had become a symbol of knowledge and hope, the woman every child called Miss Clara, with a mix of respect and love. Lessons filled the air with laughter, chalk smudges, and voices stumbling over new words, proof that a dream had taken root in the harshest soil. By evening, when the sun leaned toward the purple mountains, neighbors often gathered by the little schoolhouse, sometimes for meetings about crops, sometimes to hear Clara read poems, sometimes just to sit and listen as Rosa spun stories of her youth. No longer divided by ranch lines, they had become one family. And at night, with the oil lamp glowing soft against her face, Clara sat at her writing desk, thinking of the long road that had led her here. The old letter from Boston, the collapse in the desert, the battles for her school. Every hardship, every wound, had carried her to this truth. This was where she belonged. One late afternoon, while she mended Daniel's shirt on the porch, the steady drumming of hooves rose from the red dust road. She looked up and froze. A thin young figure, clothes patched and torn, eyes weary yet burning with determination, leaned against the ranch gate. Ethan was the first to step forward, hand on his horse's reins. "Who are you looking for?" he asked, his voice low but kind. The girl's reply rasped from a dry throat. "Forgive me. I heard there's a school here. I'm a teacher. I need a place to start again." With those words, her knees gave way. Clara rushed to catch her, the memory striking her like thunder. This was her, years ago, collapsed on desert sand, with nothing left. Tears welled as she whispered almost to her own ghost, "You're safe now." Rosa and Cookie hurried out, carrying the girl inside. The smell of warm bread and stew filled the air, just as it had on Clara's first night of salvation. Neighbors soon gathered, all recognizing the familiar sight. Another lost soul finding a door of hope at Circle C. When the girl awoke, Clara sat by her side, holding her hand. "What's your name?" Clara asked gently. "Sarah Wilson, from Colorado. I heard this place needed a teacher." Her voice trembled, but in it lived a hunger for life. Clara squeezed her hand, eyes soft as an older sister's. "You've come to the right place. Rest now. You won't have to walk alone anymore." Ethan stood in the doorway, his gaze resting on his wife. Their smiles met, silent, knowing. Fate had circled back, giving new meaning to the old path. Clara realized the gift that had once saved her was now the light she could pass on to another. That evening, as the sun sank behind the purple mountains, Daniel's laughter rang from the back pasture, twining with the wind across the plains. Clara looked from Sarah to the schoolhouse, to the community around on her, and she understood. Even the darkest roads, if walked with courage, could lead to the most beautiful of destinations. Perhaps all of us have known a road that felt hopeless. Yet as Clara's story shows, sometimes it is those very steps taken in despair that lead us to the place where we truly belong, to love, to faith, to home. The desert was no longer just a wasteland. It had become a hearth, a symbol of hope passed down from one generation to the next. What do you think? Does fate have its way of guiding us to the people who matter most? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support is what keeps these tales of the heart alive.